Hi, I'm Anthony Aufdenkampe from LimnoTech.
And I'm Shanna Rucker from LimnoTech.
We're looking forward to sharing with you some of the work that our colleagues and us are doing with diverse and disparate environmental data. It's easy to get lost in this alphabet soup of data science, libraries and jargon and tools that are available and frankly provide unbelievable, incredible power to help us make sense out of data. And in that process, it's often easy to forget that in most cases, the biggest challenge is actually gathering that data from all the various sources and organizing it for analysis. So, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the value of open data and how you can use it to enhance the data that you're all collecting yourselves. EPRI members are already familiar with some of the amazing benefits of open data from the Energy Information Administration, for example, which really was one of the leading open data systems in this country. Environmental data has been a little slower to catch up, but it's beginning to with initiatives like this Internet of Water initiative. One of the keys to open data and making it work is this principle called FAIR. So, FAIR data are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And what that means is that it's not enough to just make the data downloadable, but it helps to have it easily discoverable or findable. And then once you have it, having it have the proper metadata and structures so that it's readily interoperable without a whole lot of human intervention, and then reusable by others. I'm going to show really briefly here a demonstration of the power of this system from Model My Watershed, which is a web application that we've worked on. Here I am. I'm going to just quickly search for a watershed near me in Minnesota, and or a town actually. And I'm going to show how we can just, with a few button clicks, select a location on a map and use that to run some geospatial queries to figure out what is the receiving watershed draining into that location. What are the characteristics of that watershed, such as land use, et cetera, and a whole variety of others. And then more importantly for this conversation is what kind of monitoring data have been collected in that watershed. And here we're searching a variety of catalogs, making the data findable. And this one in particular shows us all the monitoring sites from USGS and other monitoring networks, such as the ones that I'm showing here. If we click on this particular site, for example, we automatically fetch the latest data for discharge and precipitation. And we can even fetch the last week or month of data to use in our analyses. So all of this happens because under the hood, we are using APIs. And I'm going to pass things over to Shanna here.
So API stands for Application Programming Interface. And it's the code that connects two different applications and allows them to talk. So in this simple graphic shown here, the API is represented by the cloud in the middle, and it serves as the intermediary between the client and the database, and it allows the client to access this data. So shown here is this U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service open access species data API. And so I'll go through a quick demo of how this data can be accessed using some code in R. So let's say that I want to find the number of endangered and threatened species in a particular county. So first, this ECOS API requires me to know the Phipps county code. And luckily, there's a separate API where I can find that county code just using a set of coordinates. So I can input those coordinates in a standard URL string for this API and get an output of this code that can then serve as an input for my next API query. So for this ECOS data set, I'm able to build another URL query. And in this filter line is a string where I have the Phipps County code that I got from the other API. And this demonstrates the interoperability of these two systems. So once I have that, I'm able to get the data, but I use a few more lines of code to get it into a format that's easily reusable for many different purposes. So from this data frame, one example way to use it is by visualizing it in a bar chart. And this process can be repeated and expanded using other locations and also a range of different search criteria.
This is an example of how Shanna was able to gather data from federal data hubs. And as I mentioned earlier, this Internet of Water and other environmental data hubs are beginning to expand with academics and even citizen science groups and conservation organizations beginning to contribute to environmental data. This website right here is another one that we've worked on. This one's called Monitor My Watershed. And it's a way for conservation organizations to share their data and make it available on the Internet of Water. And what's somewhat unique about this is that it can handle two different types of environmental data. The EnviroDIY is a system where people can share environmental IoT sensor data sets from kind of classic water quality monitoring. And then also on this website is the ability to share data from aquatic macroinvertebrates using the LeafPak protocol, which is a biotic measure of water quality. Here's just one example site from one of our clients near the Twin Cities, and they've got some sensors that measure water level at this site. And they've also, at this site, used this macroinvertebrate protocol 4 different times to assess the pollution tolerance. And some of you are probably familiar with these biological indices, sometimes multimetric indices that can be built off of individual counts of different species, macroinvertebrates or fish, and you can see the different ratings. If we zoom in, you can see how the data are organized and easy to add. Here are all the different species and the relative sensitivities and the final results for each of these species. So what is somewhat unique about this system is that under the hood, it's running an interoperability system called the Observations Data Model 2, which was designed specifically for interoperability of a whole wide variety of data types. For those of you who have heard of the Open Geospatial Consortium, which kind of standardizes geospatial information, this utilizes the observations and measurement standard, which is now being increasingly used by most federal agencies for sharing environmental data.
So LimnoTech is experienced in building data dashboards for visualizing data. Shown here is an example of a dashboard that is relatively easy to establish once you've got the data available. And we have buoy data from a nuclear plant near Lake Michigan. So in most cases, once the main barrier of getting the data is overcome, you can create tools that can allow a user to easily understand the data and make informed science-based decisions. This approach also has the potential for EPRI to have automated dashboards with relevant species and environmental data for any member plant or power line.
Thank you so much for listening to our talk. We'll looking forward to participating in the conversations tomorrow.